we're going to talk a little bit about health and wellness today. Sally, thanks for joining me. I mentioned before we turned on the recorder, you're the first person I've interviewed that's standing up. So what's that all about? Do you want to start there?
Because I've seen enough evidence that sitting is the new smoking.
I love it.
So what we do at PAI Health, PAI stands for Personal Activity Intelligence. We've seen a load of clinical studies and data that if you lead an active lifestyle, it absolutely increases your probability of developing a chronic condition.
Right.
And then down the line, dying from a chronic condition. And so it helps me keep my ideas flowing. It makes me feel invigorated and it reminds me to move more.
Formally introduce you, Sally Powell. You're with PAI Health. You already mentioned what the PAI stands for. I was consuming some of your YouTube content earlier today. So check out their YouTube channel if you haven't already. We'll make sure that's linked to this interview. We always like to kind of start with some warm-up stuff. So just, what's keeping you energized lately?
So here in Vancouver, Canada, where we are based, there are rumors of a fourth wave coming. And perhaps like many of you out there in John's audience, you may have gone through a boom-bust cycle in terms of your fitness with the lockdowns.
Yeah.
And so I'm on my second ascent of getting healthier. And what I've started to do recently is nightclub boxing. So this is going to a facility where they have all the disco lights on, pumping rap or dance music, and you're literally boxing a sandbag. And
I love it.
And being a busy working parent, like many of us are, I find that I'm very time poor. And so for me to get the maximum PAI points in the minimum amount of time where it's fun for me, great music, great atmosphere. Today I got 24 points, PAI points in 50 minutes. Wow. So that helps me maintain my weekly 100 average.
That's really cool. And we're going to talk about the 100 score and the difference in your model versus other wellness programs out there.
Sure.
So I'm glad you mentioned the points. That's a good seed you planted there. So this is called dance boxing? Is that what it's called that you're into now? Is it, or did I get that wrong?
Nightclub dancing.
Nightclub.
Boxing. Yeah, it's almost dancing. You're in a club atmosphere. I mean, it's been a long time since I was in a nightclub, and I don't think I'll ever see one ever again.
Me too.
So this is literally some young, more middle-aged people in a nightclub scenario. You have a coach telling you about the boxing formations. You've got your boxing gloves on, and it's just high-intensity interval training for 50 minutes.
I love it.
And it goes really well. And I've tried the stationary bike. I have one of those at home. It's really about trying different ways to look after your body and also managing stress. I'll be really honest. COVID, working from home, managing a challenging business environment on top of scaling a startup. It does catch up with you and keep you up at night. So I do a variety of yoga, long distance running, and now nightclub boxing, which I squeeze in at lunchtime.
I love it.
But I'm really here saying that physical activity and looking after your body, it is a cyclical thing. It is boom bust.
Yeah.
And perhaps I can share. Really, my background is purely insurance.
Yeah.
Joining a startup and doing insurtech was a part of my realization that the particularly health insurance industries in many parts of the world are pretty broken in terms of the provider costs, the hospital costs are going up and up and up with medical inflation.
Yeah.
The premiums and the benefits are getting less and less. And the premiums are getting more and more, particularly group health.
Yeah.
And the life health spectrum, a lot of employees don't even know what the benefits are on their life policies or who the provider even is.
Yeah.
And so really there is a call to action to try and find ways to engage with policyholders and consumers on a what's in it for me level.
Right.
And I've had a long career working for some of the largest global health insurers from the UK. I was out in Asia for a long time. I've worked for Bupa Global, most recently for AXA, Global Healthcare. Yeah. And what really jumped out at me was we still don't have a real scientific metric to measure how an insurance company enabled a better health outcome for an individual within one premium year.
Right.
And that is really important because insurance, life and health is still very transactional. So when you are talking to a friend or referring an insurance company, 9 times out of 10, you're talking about a claims experience, either a really good one or a really bad one.
Yeah.
How awesome would it be if we could reframe that to say like, hey, John, with X insurer, I've been engaging on this digital insurtech program, and it's really moved the needle on my health and my sense of well-being. And that metric could be like, I lost 20 pounds, or it's helped me with meditation, or it's prescribed me the optimal amount of physical activity that I need to reduce the risk of me dying from a cardiovascular disease by up to 25%. And that's what the PAI score essentially is. And so we have found success. We have been reviewed by Gen Re, the Berkshire Hathaway reinsurer, who have realized that our PAI score absolutely correlates to managing risk, mortality in particular, and a bit of morbidity. We're doing more work on that. But what that's enabled us to do is to win partnerships such as Zurich, one of the largest Swiss life insurers, as well as most recently Cigna Global. So at the moment, we're running this fantastic initiative in Singapore where new customers are considering buying a Cigna Global product because they're willing to share their wearable data.
Right.
And the what's in it for me is up front and center. We're going to give you your personalized score based on science, easy to understand, do any activity that you want.
Yeah.
This is not just about steps, which people have been very fixated on.
Yes. Yeah. And, we giving a little bit away here, but in the research that I did on PAI, heart rate seems to be a big focus for you guys. And, I love how you started with like, you're doing a variety of things to elevate your heart rate. You're doing some HIIT training, some yoga, and variety, I think, is the key. We can talk about the metrics and all of that, but just to stay on some of the points that you made there, the piece around prevention is so important. And then, the with them, the what's in it for me, and using things like gamification to engage people. What I'd really like to see, and maybe we'll talk about it today, is, it's great for carriers to partner with companies like PAI and to provide tools to help people be more proactive, more active, and to care and be more conscious about their health. But part of the WIFM, I think, is carriers need to reward that activity, almost like a usage-based insurance. We're seeing that in auto through, maybe a reduction in premium.
Driving
risk
behavioral change.
Exactly,
yes,
right?
Yes,
and we know humans respond to incentives, right? So at the end of the day, how do we really, set ourselves apart as an industry and show that we care and that those things are great, that we can get these programs and partnerships and other incentives. But I think there is something to be said around, the almighty dollar as well, right? And how insurers incentivize that. And maybe you're closer to that than I am right now, because I'm talking to a lot of wellness companies. But perhaps we'll get into that. Before we do, I promise to come back to that point. So you talked a bit about your origins, and I understand, Sally, you have some global exposure experience from your background. So this really puts you in a very interesting place coming from the insurance industry. Was there anything else you wanted to mention there just about your background and kind of what I'm leading to is what led you to PAI? What on your journey through this wonderful world of insurance that we're both in, how did you find yourself at this destination at this point? You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes, thank you, John. That's a great question. Well, as I mentioned, I had a career in Asia for a while. And while I was at AXA, I was responsible for the providers, the hospital network, the clinical network across Asia. And what I found was I was helping customers, policyholders, where their premiums are on average $2,000 to $3,000 per year. So they're at the very privileged end of the spectrum. Yet I'm dealing with clinics in the Philippines where the per capita income is much, much lower down that end of the scale. And so I started to really think about how can we move the needle with the growing populations around the world, with the rate of medical inflation. And I could see that InsurTech combined with digital health would be able to make solutions more affordable and scalable because, with a SaaS business model. And so I'm glad that I made this big bet, because leaving the corporate world and all of its luxuries to go to a startup, it wasn't easy. And to anyone out there thinking about it, please feel free to get in touch with me on LinkedIn. I would be very happy to tell you these honest stories.
Yeah.
And I know a few executives like me who've done just that. And some have even started their own InsurTechs. And that's what I was really excited to be approached by you, because I think Canada has so much potential to really accelerate on InsurTech and put Canada on the map. And I'm very proud to represent Vancouver, BC, and also Canada with the work that we're doing at PAI Health, because PAI is a Canadian founded company. It was a wearable company before by a fantastic woman called Liz Dickinson, and she got the VC backing from Adidas back in the day. And she was the first person to put heart rate sensors in a wearable on the wrist. So kudos to Liz. Yeah, kudos to Liz. But the company found it difficult to compete on the hardware side. So we were sold to another VC and we pivoted to InsurTech. And this is where I came in to help build out the sales channel, leveraging my global network of insurance contacts. And to come back to really the purpose of why I joined, because I could foresee that consumers need to have a more relationship and value-based perspective to buying insurance, and it really making a difference in their lives and protecting the people that they love the most, themselves and their loved ones.
Right.
And someone told me recently that taking care of your health is the best gift you can give to the people that love you.
Well,
let's just think about that for a second. Yeah.
Yeah.
And before COVID, there was a lot of, we're in the rat race. There's a lot of FOMO. And I can admit myself that I let my health fall to the wayside.
Yeah.
And that's a disservice to the people that love me. And I've moved from, that might be like selfish or pampering myself, to actually, I need to make sure that I'm okay to take care of others.
Right.
And so insurance, I think, needs to move to a more of an assurance mindset for consumers, and no longer a grudge purchase, that I'm buying something either from a life or health perspective.
Yeah.
The second element is control and impact, influence on your premiums. So, the actuarial science has been going around for tens of thousands of years. I think they, like in the Legends of Babylon, they were actually doing insurance even back then. Like it's thousands and thousands of years old.
Yeah.
And people do feel like it's the house always wins.
Yes.
I'm paying this premium, you're underwriting me, it's a black box. So by inviting people to share their very basic biometric data, so for example, your height, your sex, your weight, which you would do traditionally in underwriting, and also blood tests sometimes, we're asking people to share their wearable data from the last 3 months, and we're just going to see where your cardiorespiratory fitness is at.
Right.
Now, the scientific term for this to measure is called a VO2 max. So your VO2 max is your body's effectiveness at converting oxygen into energy. So if you're really into sports science and they're all about this, and you may also know that the traditional way of measuring VO2 max is on a treadmill in a laboratory with a face mask, and they get you to run for 15 minutes and then run for 5 more really fast until you feel like you're going to throw up, and they say 2 minutes more. I know this because I've done this. And most people don't want to do that sort of VO2 max test. What our PAI algorithm can do is get within plus and minus 5 accuracy just based on your heart rate data of a VO2 max score.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that's a lot more inclusive and also far less effort. Yeah. And so what's special about the PAI score is that you only get PAI points for elevating your heart rate. So from your resting heart rate to your max and how long you spend in those zones, you'll be attributed PAI points. And what I really love about PAI points, and I know I've drunk the Kool-Aid a bit here, but you get the PAI points based on effort.
Right. It's based on heart rate, is it not? It's elevated
based on effort, yeah. So if you're a relatively inactive person, let's face it, you're out of shape, carry an extra 20 pounds. If you walk a mile, you're going to get so much more PAI points than your buddy who runs half marathons at the weekends.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense.
And so it's equitable.
Yeah.
And it's also a smart score. So it gets slightly harder as you get fitter. Yeah. Yeah. And so I wanted to pick up on the whole wellness trend, which I think is super important, and it gives consumers more options. And it's great to see that a lot of insurers are investing in these partnerships. However, where PAI Health stands today, we are very firm in that we are not the silver bullet.
Right.
There are so many companies out there who are best in class in nutrition, best in class in content, best in class in behavioral change, sleep, mental health, and we're partnering with them because we just want to be in the narrow, a very important lane of being a scientifically validated metric that can translate all of that great health outcomes into an underwriting environment.
Yeah,
we've got to have that yardstick. Yeah.
You're part of the, not to use a pun here, but pie is like part of the wellness pie, if you will, right? You're a slice of that pie. The activity component, I guess, would that be the proper lane to put you in?
Yes. So prescribing your personal dose of exercise, of how much you need, John, on a weekly basis.
I do feel like you're talking to me
scientifically. Yeah, I know, but well, in us all, because I mean, over-exercise is the real thing.
Yes.
10,000 steps can lead to injuries.
Sure.
It's also not very inclusive because you need a lot of time to do 10,000 steps. Yeah. And you also need working legs. Like there's a lot of things around that. It's an arbitrary number.
Yeah.
However, with something like PAI, because it's just about raising your heart rate, you can do whatever you want, whenever you want. We don't care. Yeah. We're not telling you what to do.
Yeah, right.
And so we do have super fans of PAI. At the same, other end, we have people who don't like it, and that's fine too. Yeah. But the beauty of our tech stack, we are API first, means that we can also be something in the background.
Right.
And we have a dashboard that does data analytics. As long as users are happy to consent to share their wearable data, they don't even have to engage with the PAI score. Okay. And so really, really the main advantage for insurers and the partners that we have is that we are giving them aggregated data. Right. Insurance companies don't suffer from a lack of data.
No.
They're drowning in it a lot of the time. But the problem is a lot of insurance companies have data from different platforms is not aggregated. Yeah. Insurance companies traditionally grow through acquisition. And so you might have 2 or 3 tech stacks sitting behind, and it's difficult to merge them all. But in Canada, and that's why I'm so excited, John, in Canada, It is much simpler. And this is why I have great hope for InsurTech here.
Why is that? Is it because there's fewer carriers?
It's a younger country.
Yeah.
It's a younger country, and there is the potential to leapfrog the legacy systems or just buy the better systems. I've seen great work from Munich Re, from Gen Re, and also Swiss Re, and also RGA.
Right.
They are coming out with these tech stacks that can help plug in startup and aggregated data to make a really powerful quoting tool that's much more consumer focused. And we don't see this in Europe, for example, because there are so many legacy systems.
Right. So that's well put. And I think we certainly suffer our part from legacy systems. The founders I talk to, and mostly tech founders, struggle with that. I would say it seems to be more pronounced from my experience in the life and health space, like challenges with integration, for example, because of legacy systems, et cetera. But I think it's a smaller ship to turn in Canada.
Yes.
So yes. I definitely, to pick up on a point you talked about data aggregation, there is no shortage of data from what we observe is it's more of a data ingestion challenge that a lot of carriers have. So by bringing it together, right? It's like, here you go. Here's some bite-sized pieces that's already been put together for you. So because they're already dealing with their own internal issues, trying to get their own systems to talk and be compatible, especially with the growth through acquisition, which we're seeing. We continue to see some big deals even this year. I'm wondering, because you've talked a lot about the PAI score and the different things that you guys are doing and how you're contributing to the space. Can you talk to me more on I guess we'll start like on a user level as far as like interacting with PAI. How do I find, like, as far as like an end user is concerned, do I have to be introduced to PAI through my carrier or through my MGA or my advisor, or is PAI a B2C solution as well that someone can just download from the App Store?
That's a great question. Thank you. So initially, as we were figuring out our minimum viable product, we built a consumer app, which is still live in the App Store today. And that really helped us informed on retention rates, engagement, how to better explain, educate around how to get the most out of your PAI score. And so after 2.5 years, we have a huge amount of data that we have these proof points that carriers really like to see. So for example, people who engage with PAI on average increase their levels of physical activity by up to 25%, which is great. And they sustain this over the course of at least 6 months. So that's really fantastic. So at the peak of users globally, we had around 45,000. And that's with no advertising because we couldn't afford it at the time. So this is a very important proof point with the carriers because they want to know, does this work? Do consumers like it? But really our products are API, which makes us completely, we integrate to any third-party platform, whether it's a quoting tool, whether it's an app. And then we have our dashboard, which is far more analytical. It helps us to enable our insurance partners to run campaigns. Right. So campaigns are particularly useful in a corporate wellness setting, for example. And so to answer your question, yes, we do have an app online, on the App Store and also Android, but really it's an elaborate demo because PAI is an algorithm. And so we found that we really needed the proof points and for people to try it. The other really fantastic development is that our parent company, because we were acquired last year, so they're a major wearable manufacturer. Right. They put the PAI algorithm in the majority of their health watches and smart bands. They just put it out into the world.
Very cool.
And in over 1 year, we have over 16 million monthly active users that are engaging with a PAI score. Wow. Now, granted, some of those it's just in the background.
Yeah.
But we're generating that data, and what we're trying to layer on through data analytics now is how the PAI score is affecting people's sleep, their step, their stress, because these wearables all measure all of those biometrics. And then we get into the more predictive space. Because John, at the beginning of the chat, you're asking like, what led me to PAI? I would very much like to have those proof points where I can empower carriers to go to that CFO and say, if you invest in this wellness module, we can reduce your premiums by X within one premium year, because we can anticipate your population to improve their cardiovascular health by average of X.
Right.
That to me is the holy grail.
That's powerful. Yeah. Yeah.
Because most CFOs, they're tight on the bottom line. And sometimes they're thinking, well, with staff turnover these days, why am I investing in getting, healthier if I'm not going to see the payback in 3-4 years' time? Right. It's got to be with that one premium year. And also employees, they need this more than ever now.
Yeah.
And we, again, want to highlight that PAI is not the silver bullet, but we know that physical activity can really help positive impacts for mental health, for weight loss, for type 2 diabetes prevention, for hypertension. Like we have data on this all, but we want to partner with the best in class.
Did you on that point, because like a lot of these large insurance companies and Fortune 500 companies have wellness programs and they promote these things, at least they talk about it internally. And I've been on the receiving end of that myself in my career. Did you find it hard to get to carriers, or did the message land the first time you talked to them? Because you've got those connections, the various people in the industry. And I'd like to talk about that sometimes, because sometimes getting your message to land, even though everything is, makes perfect sense, and there's a connection point to ROI, to bottom line, to better outcomes, to even market share growth, it's not always that easy. And the insurance industry is hard to sell to. So can you talk a bit about your experience there, as much as you can share?
Sure. Well, I always say that insurance is a people business.
Yes.
It's a people business first and foremost. And folks are friendly and they're great. And they'll always take a meeting, particularly when it's around innovation to do with InsurTech.
Right.
And so getting the meeting, getting in front of the decision makers, it's not that difficult. And most of the large insurance companies will go through an accelerator like Plug and Play in Silicon Valley, which we've been through, also the one in Japan, which is awesome. And so we do get to work with we get to meet with a lot of really fantastic and progressive insurers. Now, this is where this can become a bit of a risk to a younger startup, because time is our most precious commodity. Yeah. And so it can become a bit of a time suck. And I've heard phrases like InsurTech tourist. The one that I heard recently was like an InsurTech petting zoo. Yeah, they just want to come and play with you and talk to you and research you, and that's all really fantastic, because you do get some great insights coming back. Yeah. But as a young startup, that can be a huge time suck, and can lead you down paths. And then you might have a POC or a pilot, is it paid or unpaid, and then your main sponsors move to a different department or leaves. And so there is a lot of risk involved. So what we have learned in the last 2 years is to try and build out our ideal customer profile after we landed that first lighthouse customer. And the lighthouse customer wasn't going to be the one that was going to give us a lot of revenue, wasn't going to be the one that was going to put us on the, financially on the map per se. But it did signal to the other insurers to take us more seriously. And so there's a couple of things I look out for now. An insurance partner is, do they have, aside from an innovation team, an execution team?
Yes. Well put. Execution is where a lot of this falls down, actually, because a lot of, and this is for lack of a better phrase, a lot of carriers struggle with operationalizing the innovation. How do we actually get this solution to market? They might love the idea of the problem you're trying to solve.
Yeah.
But their challenges, and I don't want to use the word integrate, but I'm just going to say operationalizing it, right? And so that's a key thing you just said, because you might have a digital garage or an innovation team or even a venture fund, but like, who's the team that's actually going to put together,
roll up the sleeves and make the thing and make sure it's scalable.
And get it to market.
So, yes. And where I think a lot of insurtechs focus on and place, it is important, but it's important not to put too much importance on it.
Yeah.
Is senior stakeholder buy-in. Because this group of people, again, innovation is cool. You want to be seen as progressive. You'll say all the right things and support it. You might sign off on some budgets eventually, like marketing.
Yeah.
But they're not the group who are doing the work.
No.
So
it won't be there on day one.
No. So again, the team and I are very particular about focusing our time on the partners that have a practical execution team. And we've been really grateful to find this with Zurich and also Cigna. In Cigna's case, they ran a global RFP. And the timelines, they did what they say they would do.
Yeah.
And it's been, there's lots of great companies out there. Again, the Zurich team that we work with are very, very strong in execution and very passionate about what they do.
That's very wise advice. That can also take a lot of time. And you could apply that to investor relations as well. Like when you're talking to VCs, like, how many exits have they had? Were they successful exits? What did the companies move on to do, et cetera? What kind of support did they receive? And the ICP around the carrier is just as important. I would say the challenge there, and this is my plug for community, the challenge there is that takes a lot of time, and you won't always know enough about a carrier to understand all of those things. Might not be obvious on its face. You can do some research through secondary sources, but a lot of the times the primary sources are not always available to you. So I think that's why having a community like this, which is what we're trying to build here in Canada, or do our part to contribute towards, is so important, because you can have those conversations with other people in the space that may have already gone before you. And it's another reason to listen to this podcast, right? So
absolutely, it is so important, and I would hope that the insurtechs in Canada do increasingly adopt more of a partnership model, because in an ecosystem like insurance, and let's face it, it is an ecosystem. You've got the brokers, you've got the providers, the reinsurers. I just name a few.
Yeah.
The multiple handoff points for customers alone, it is an ecosystem, and there's no one silver bullet.
No,
and
right.
I have noticed that some insurtechs, which I've seen at conferences and they're pitching to insurers, they make the error of coming out guns blazing and saying statements that pretty much say we can solve all the problems in insurance. And poof, your credibility goes like that in a second. I've seen much more success with insurtechs to say, this is the problem statement. We understand we can fix specifically this, and we believe that the knock-on effects is X, Y, and Z.
Be laser focused, stick to your core competency, and then you can branch out from there. But I call that boiling the ocean, right? When you go in and try to and they've seen 100 pitches, right? So they'll see right through it. And I love your honesty and your candor about how we're not the silver bullet. We're not trying to solve every aspect of health and wellness. We're one really important component that can be used, but there's so many other pieces to that pie. Again, no pun intended.
And we need to see the data of the attribution of these wellness interventions. That's what's going to make it stick. That's what that CFO is going to say. Yes, I'm going to renew for the next 2 years because I can see that this direct impact of these wellness intervention has led to a reduce in my claims cost, which means that my premiums are going to either stick this year or be reduced.
Right. So for other things on the menu here tonight as we talk, let's talk a little bit about the stage of PAI. So PAI, as you mentioned, is started in Canada. So it was a great Canadian success story. I think 1999 was the first established.
Yes, the company was originally called Mio Global by Liz Dickinson. And in 2018, it pivoted to PAI Health and became a SaaS company. So really a wonderful Canadian story of just having a flip. But just in the short last 3 years, we have made really good headway in the insurtech space. Back in 2018, we were a bit early. We were a bit early.
That's hard. Kudos to you for admitting that. Sorry to interrupt your thought.
Yeah.
But that timing does play a part. You might have the greatest thing. And sometimes you got to realize that you might just be a few years ahead. And not everyone has time to just stand back and wait for the market to catch up. But that's continue that thought. But that's really important. Yeah, I don't hear that every day. Sometimes we're
and this is very much thanks to the VC, because the VC saw us as a long-term strategic play.
And that's
so there was an amount of patience there, but that patience has been rewarded now because we have been able to signal that we have product market fit by major global insurers coming to us and asking to play around with our app to do their own POCs with the intention to then consume our APIs within their digital assets.
Right.
So, I mean, in the beginning, of course, from a product development perspective, we were itching to build out an end-to-end solution like a lot of our competitors.
Sure.
We were itching to do it. But the risk and the upfront cost of doing that is so high. Yeah. And we also have the humility to know that some people like Peloton, some people like Strava, some people like Apple Rings. We are who we are.
Right.
So staying in our lane and being focused is incredibly important. And that's what we're doing this second half of the year as well. We are really, really focused on the insurance partnerships that we have to make sure that we hit our KPIs and that we can start those scaling conversations earlier than what we were told that, it would be acceptable to do. And here's another learning. The insurance industry is very, very married to 12 months because that's the cycle of premiums.
Sure.
And so, doing any kind of pilot or POC, there is this, 12 months. 12 months.
Yeah.
12 months is a long time for insurtech.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Especially when you've got a cash burn, a 6-figure cash burn sometimes just to keep it.
Yeah.
And what I've seen, I'm talking about. Yeah.
So what I've seen, in our own experience and also other, friends and insurtechs is that it's okay to have an internal timeline of 6 months. Because after 6 months, you've pretty much got the amount of data that you need to start talking about the proof points, how you can iterate and improve, and you can start the proper pricing conversations. Because that's another big thing when you engage with carriers is if they love your idea, they see potential, they start going, how much?
Right.
As a young insurtech, that puts you at a great disadvantage because I'm trying to convince you of a product which value that you don't understand yet.
Right. Yeah. So how can I be in a position to really put a price on it and have that resonate with you and have an established value?
Exactly. So Exactly. And so, we've got around that by making it very clear with our early Lighthouse customers that this is discounted pricing.
Yeah, that's
we're able to, because we're testing and learning. However, once we can demonstrate the efficacy and the value of our solutions and how it contributes to solving some other problems, the value is no longer something that is subjective. Because otherwise, as an insurtech, you can be boxed in very quickly to 3 cents per user per month.
Right. Now, that's bold of you and courageous, and I think it's very smart to come out with a discounted price model. Did that turn anybody off? Where they said, "No, I want the certainty. I want you to lock in now. And a lot will even throw around the exclusivity word, right? I want exclusivity.
Yeah.
Like, I want to own you, basically. Like, did you have to turn down anyone, or did anyone get turned off by that approach?
Yes, we've had one case where the pricing model, they wanted to lock us in for 3 years, and it just wasn't something that we were comfortably doing. And that wasn't a difficult decision because the economics it wasn't viable.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So that wasn't too difficult. The second one around exclusivity was an interesting one because very few are willing to pay. And so where we came down, because they're big, and they're famous. So they say, well, you're going to get so much marketing collateral out of working with us. So, that's like millions of dollars. You're tiny.
Right.
And that's interesting. So where we landed was a right of first refusal.
Mm-hmm.
ROFR, a right of first refusal. And so we put it to countries, and we put it in timescales. Timescales. Yeah. What I would have done if I'd done it again was to put a revenue next to it as well.
Yeah, smart.
But but you live and you learn, and that's where I would like to encourage other insurtechs that these, we are younger and we are smaller, and we're working a lot of the time with these very well-established carriers, and there are channels to scale. But remember that they do need to have external innovation to come in to inject fresh ideas and the tech. They need it. And so it's absolutely okay to push back and put in boundaries that work for you and your business. Yeah.
And oftentimes I think there's a fear around the pushback, but if done correctly, it's a moment to educate. Really, like, it's an opportunity to educate the person at the other side of the table that we simply can't do that because it's not sustainable. We won't be here. And maybe we need to spend more time around establishing the value, getting to know each other, and building that trust. But it's an opportunity to educate the other side, and to really actually flip the table and really just become partners.
Absolutely. And remember, the average insurance exec has never worked in a startup.
Yeah.
And so the mindset is like, 6 months. Yeah. But if you're negotiating, doing due diligence for 6 months, that's, could be really dire to a startup.
100%.
The reason why...
Keep going. Yeah. Sorry.
I was going to say the reason why I'm more in tune to this is that I've worked in large carriers as a P&L owner.
Mm-hmm.
And so coming into a startup was really eye-opening. I had to unlearn and relearn from a mindset perspective, the value of time and process.
Yeah.
And that's been helpful as we've gone through due diligence, for example, because I know that the due diligence process in large insurers is complex, as it should be, because it's a highly regulated industry. Yeah. But what I've done is I've concurrently started that off really early on while we are doing the statement of work and contract negotiations.
Right.
Because I know that could be a 3-month process.
That's wise.
Instead of getting to the deal, like, okay, due diligence time. Yeah.
Well, and a lot of things have to come together. And, you talk about, it's so true. Most carriers, professionals that work inside of a carrier have never run a startup. And so how do you, understand that, get them to understand that and appreciate that without walking a mile in your shoes? So that's challenging. We talked about the education piece, but I think a lot of founders probably fall into the trap of fear of appearing desperate, that, they don't want to show too many cards to the carrier because the carrier might think they're unstable or whatever. But I think if you really focus on, here's the product, the technology, here's the engineering behind the IP and, whatever the solution is, and keep the focus around that. And I think that's a nugget of gold you just shared. Getting into due diligence sooner versus later. It's an opportunity to really build some empathy, I think.
Yes, it will.
Because they're never really going to truly appreciate what it's like to run a startup.
No, because you go into the business continuity planning section and it's just like, well, we only have 10 people, when you have all of these protocols. The other aspect of due diligence for a startup is once you've done it for one, you've pretty much got a blueprint and a template to do them for the others.
Right.
So from a corporate knowledge perspective, for your startup, it's worth doing these due diligence, that one time, and to take your team through them. Yeah. Because a lot of the time your team, depending on their background, they may have not been used to this type of corporate due diligence. And so It's worth putting everyone through the ringer for once, because then you have pretty much the stock answers. It also flags up the gaps. And also there will be sections where you fall short of the insurer's standard.
Yeah, the requirement.
And it costs money to become that. For example, availability. Like a lot of insurers want 4 nines, so 99 and then 4 nines.
Yeah.
And there was a time when we could only offer 3. Mm-hmm. And instead of being worried that this would be a showstopper, we went cap in hand and we said, going to a 4.9 would cost us like $100,000, which we can't afford right now. So can we look at this like in a year's time when our business is successful with you? Mm-hmm. And they were like, yeah, okay.
Wow. So, and the honesty is the best policy, right? Like,
absolutely.
I've been through more RFPs in my career on the supplier side with carriers, and there's such a temptation to present yourself to be something you're not. And in some cases, the carriers make the startup better because it's like, yes, we got to get these things in order, find your SOPs and all that stuff and your protocols. But and other things, it's just impossible. Like you said, because there's economic constraints, and it's better to just be honest and upfront about it. That we can do this based on our size and our scale today. We can certainly grow into this with your support, and I think that wins a lot more points, especially when you're in a space where you have sometimes all you have is your reputation and your work.
Yes.
Right. And if because after the contracts are signed, you got to deal with me. Right. And I think a lot of people forget how important that is. Right. It's the service delivery behind, after.
And insurance is a people business.
Exactly.
Yeah. The integrity side is so important.
Can you talk about, Sally, what's next for PAI? What, as far as the stage of the company, talk about whatever you want, if it's expansion, fundraising, what's next for PAI?
Sure. Well, I'm delighted to share that as of yesterday, we're a finalist at the Novartis Biome Challenge for Cardiovascular Disease Prevention and Management. And I took part in a 4-minute pitch. It was in a live studio, but we joined it virtually. They asked for startups all around the world that have a cardiovascular disease solution. to submit. They chose 8. And then yesterday, they chose 3 finalists.
Wow.
And we will be competing in the final in Montreal on the 28th of October this year. And I'm even more delighted to share that PAI Health, we won the Audience Community Award.
Wow.
Now, this is all about tackling the huge preventable health crisis in Canada today around heart disease.
Yeah.
So after cancer, it is the largest killer. Like 20% of deaths across Canada is heart disease, completely preventable. And if we put this on with the lens for First Nations, so for a First Nations man, you are 30% more likely to die from a CVD than a non-Indigenous person. For a First Nations woman, you are over 70% more likely to die. So there is huge room for improvement. And this is what really drives me and our purpose at PAI Health. We want to make healthcare development in Canada inclusive and scalable. Like it's got to be scalable. And because we are a piece of software, we are able to draw heart rate data, not just from wearables, but also earbuds now that pick up heart rate, also smart clothing, smart textiles.
Right.
But all of this is more affordable, also for remote populations. Right? Yeah. And again, most people have a smartphone these days.
Right.
Sharing that data. And so this is remote cardiovascular disease management by prescribing an easy to understand number like 100. I just need to get moving, whatever it is I want to do.
Yeah.
And so it's a lot more intuitive. I'm so excited about this development because, again, it allows us to make great contacts within Canada, but also work in partnership with a pharmaceutical company that has all this clinical experience. But ultimately, it's about validation, right?
Sure.
That we have, we're going out into the world and we are being chosen to get involved to solve and tackle some of the biggest problems, healthcare problems in Canada today.
And you know what? Shout it from the rooftops. It's about time we start talking about other health issues that impact way more people. And, why isn't our media talking about this, right? And there's so many things that you guys are doing. So Novartis, that's a great feather in your cap. Congratulations on that accomplishment. That's amazing. So
thank you so much. so what I wanted to say, what's next is digital therapeutics, which maybe some of your audience have heard of before, have not. And this is really about apps and digital platforms being prescribed by physicians through what's called a digital formulary. So in the US, it's increasingly common that a physician will prescribe their patient an app to follow for diabetes management, for example, and that has a billing code. So it's hard-coded into the healthcare system. And I believe that this is going to be the next wave in Canada, digital therapeutics. And so we very much need to work in partnership with fantastic, progressive pharmaceutical companies like Novartis, because they are very progressive in developing and investing in the future digital therapeutics in combination of their drug therapies.
That's fascinating stuff. So I'm really interested. We could probably do a follow-up segment just on that.
I'd love to. It's a really fantastic topic, and particularly since COVID and the inability to access face-to-face physician care.
Sure. Yeah.
We have seen great adoption, not just in telemedicine, but also I was looking at the stats of wearable adoption rates. In North America, they've accelerated from a year-on-year average of 10% to 43%. There's been a massive bump. People are much more engaged in wanting to know the numbers that drive their health. How long am I sleeping? Yeah. What are my stress levels? What's my resting heart rate? Yeah. How many steps am I taking? And so on and so forth.
prevention's the key, right? And like you talked about, those biometric KPIs are so important to build awareness around those things. So great work you guys are doing. On that point, what does PAI want to be known for in the minds, the hearts and minds of your users, of your carrier partners, of your other channel partners like Novartis? What do you guys want to be known for?
That we are a solution for everyone, John.
Love it.
We're completely inclusive. I often get asked the question, well, there's the PAI algorithm, you're in major studies in Norway, you've had a big study in China, you've had studies in North America, but surely people from different ethnicities, different body shapes, people are different. Yes, absolutely. BMI is a prime example for that. There are variances from a physiological, from your ethnicity. However, the PAI score simply measures the difference between your resting and maximum heart rate. So as long as you're a Homo sapien and you have a heart, it's completely inclusive.
So it won't work for cyborgs. It won't work for cyborgs then.
No. Now, the only restriction that we haven't found a solution yet for in our algorithm are people who are on beta blockers.
Okay.
So because that changes their heart rate. But apart from that, as long as you have a human heart, it's for everyone. And the fact that it's, I'm British, so I'll leave this on a cheeky note. You can get PAI points for anything, throwing your kids up in the air, doing housework, and apparently even vigorous kissing.
Oh, wow.
I've been told. Yes.
Vigorous kissing.
It really is everything.
You know what? And that's good for so many other things too, right? And lots of endorphins and all those other things that get released. So,
to answer your question, that's what we hope PAI is going to be remembered by, that it is for everyone, all shapes, body sizes, inclusivity. And we're really strong on that. And I think that's something that is at the very core of us being a Canadian company, coming from Vancouver. That we, from the get-go, have a very inclusive, very respectful, and ultimately very equitable approach to the development of our technology, and where we believe that we can tackle the biggest problems head on and work in partnership with people, because the impact that we're doing is therefore much larger.
I love it.
So I thank you so much, John, for giving me this opportunity to chat with you. And to have a platform to share what we're doing.
Well, speaking of platforms, so where can we find PAI Health if those watching want to learn more about you?
Sure. So our website is www.paihealth.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn.
Perfect. Awesome. So Sally Powell, thank you for your time today. You've inspired me. I've been sitting this whole time. So I've had this guilt complex watching you stand there looking very healthy while I'm sitting there. So I'm going to go elevate my heart rate.
No, hold on. Put your hand on your heart.
Okay.
Put your hand on your heart. Do you feel anything, John?
I do.
Do you feel anything?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now stand up and sit down 3 times. Just 3 times.
Okay. I'm going to do this. Okay. Stand up, sit down.
Yeah. Sit down.
Okay. And one more time. No one's ever asked me to do this before. This is incredible.
Put your hand on your heart.
I feel it. It's pounding.
You feel it now.
Yeah? I'm really out of shape.
Think about the people that love you. Think about the people that you love you. Yeah. This is what keeps everything going. Not so much this, it's this.
Amen. Yeah. Amen. That is so inspiring, Sally. And I think we just found our demo reel. I think we just found, because that's going to get our clicks up and get the message out, really, right? It's all about
This is real. This is real. This is real and human. Yeah.
Well, and you know what? Even though you're not focused on the B2C side so much, I am going to download the app after this because I'm really interested. I think gamification.
Please let me know what you think. Yeah.
Well, I think gamification is a great way to get people engaged, and I'm a competitive person myself. So if I can, anything I can track, that's kind of what I gravitate towards because it motivates me.
Yes, I would love to hear your feedback on it, and also the loss aversion part of it, because the PAI points that you gained 7 days ago, you start losing them a week later. And we have a feature of your PAI score tomorrow.
Okay.
So you get to see how much you drop.
Oh, wow.
So if you're someone who responds well to loss aversion,
yes,
the gamification aspect, that is really good.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like, I'm going to lose 50 points tomorrow. So I'm going to do something today.
You don't get moving and get ahead of it. I love that. That's, and like we should be thinking about, like we plan out so many other things in our day. And oftentimes, like you talked about at the beginning of the interview, going through cycles and the boom and the bust. And I find when I'm usually going on to a bust cycle in my physical activity, it's when exercise takes a back seat. It's like the last thing I schedule for myself.
Yeah.
And it should be, and COVID did force that to a certain extent, because you had to book your time in the gym if you were going to a gym or to some sort of a class. So you had to think about it. So I think conscious thought is so important, and just bringing it to the front of your consciousness.
And it's a feedback loop, John, because you're able to see, well, I thought, running 5 miles was helpful at this speed. But actually, I spent 20 minutes doing a high intensity exercise on my app. Gave me much better health benefits. So it does educate you, and it does change your behavior. And ultimately, taking care of yourself is an ongoing thing. And sometimes it's going to take a back seat. Sometimes it isn't.
Yeah. But you've got an accountability partner in PAI, right? So
yes,
what else can you ask
absolutely.
For?
Absolutely.
That this is so awesome. You've really inspired me today. Thank you, Sally. You can really tell that you believe in what you're doing, and thanks for what you guys are doing. I wish you guys great success, and I look forward to the follow-up conversations, plural, because I know we'll have many more. So thank you very much again.
Yeah, I'd love to. John, you're a great interviewer, and I appreciate you taking time out in your evening to accommodate the time zones. Absolute pleasure.